Hello everyone, this is Sheila Shaffie and welcome back to another episode by ProcessArc. As you can see, I finally made it outside and hopefully between the sounds of the birds and the dogs barking, you can hear me clearly. In today's video, we are going to finally go through building out a customer journey map together. I had promised that we would do this a few weeks ago, but of course there's always so many other interesting things that come up. So we'll get to it today. But before we jump into the step-by-step building out a customer journey map, I just want to make sure that we talk about what exactly is a customer journey map, what its goals are, how you can prepare for it, and then ultimately we'll jump into the step-by-step building out of a customer journey map. And by the way, if you like topics like this, innovation, creative problem solving, customer journey mapping, I would be utterly grateful if you hit that subscribe button. So let's start with exactly what is a customer journey map. I've done a video about how this is different from a process map, so if you're interested in that, please make sure you hit the button above and go into that video. But at a very high level, customer journey maps are really a documentation, a visual, graphical representation of the emotional journey that a customer goes through when they are interfacing with you, whether that's buying something or for them getting a service from you in one way or another. So it's very different from a process map in that this is about the emotions that somebody goes through versus the physical steps and the data that they provide to you along the way. Now, if you think about the goals of a customer journey map, it's fundamentally trying to figure out where you have gaps in your customer experience or the strategy that you may have for customer experience. In other words, it's trying to figure out where in the journey you are completely delighting the customer and where you may be disappointing them. So the second goal is to create a common understanding of the journey that a customer goes through. Most organizations are siloed. The marketing department, the sales department, operations, legal, compliance, they all look at the value that they provide to the company from their own lens. The customer journey map really helps organizations break down the silos that exist and look at their products and services purely from a customer's perspective. So it doesn't really matter what marketing thinks is the true value proposition or sales thinks exactly what it is that they're doing for the customer or how operations ultimately materializes the thing that was sold to the customer. It's putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and saying, all of that aside, what does it exactly feel like? What are the emotions that I go through as I purchase a new product or again, get something serviced by the company? In terms of preparation, there are really 4 steps. First, you have got to figure out the value stream that you want to understand the journey for. And so you're either going to be thinking about onboarding or you're going to be thinking about the servicing once the purchase is completed. Those are the highest level of value streams that most organizations have. You could decide to the best way of thinking about a value stream or the best way to find one that you should start your analysis with is think of a journey that is most emotionally charged. So if you're a bank and you offer money movement, like moving money from a checking account to a savings account, that's not really an emotionally charged transaction. Buying a new life insurance policy or opening a new brokerage account and transferring the hard-earned money you have to a company that you're just building a relationship with, that's an emotionally charged experience. Or putting in a claim after you've had an unfortunate accident, that is another example of a emotionally charged value stream or a journey that a customer goes through. So make sure that you do a little bit of due diligence in picking something that when you are trying to analyze and understand it, by fixing it, you're going to get tremendous lift and excitement in the company. The second thing you should consider when you're preparing for building a customer journey map are personas. So think of them as segments of your customer base that you want to better understand. So this is important because if you don't do this, you're going to come up with an anonymous persona, so a very generic journey map. Somebody that is a professional in their mid-career may have a very different set of expectations from their life insurance or their wealth management company that's someone that's just simply starting and is in their early 20s. So figuring out the persona, the characteristics of the people whose journey you want to understand in a journey map is an important criteria. The third thing that I would highly recommend is that you do a little bit of homework to understand the emotional expectations and the emotional experience that a customer has already had with you. This is important because if you don't actually talk to your customers and interview them to understand what actually happened, when you start doing the journey mapping, it's going to be your own subjective and biases that will come out in that exercise instead of you voicing what you have heard or learned from the customer. So if you want it to be as unbiased of an analysis, if you have the opportunity to physically go and talk to your customers after they've completed that journey with your company, if you have the luxury of talking to them, talk to them. If you don't, then see if you can collect some information from the people who are closest to the customer, maybe the call center, maybe the salespeople. Either way, try to get as unbiased of research input into your journey map before you start compiling it. Now, the last part, which is the easiest, is just assembling a team. When you're doing a value stream, when you're doing a journey map for a particular value stream, make sure you've got the key constituents who are involved in the process in the room helping you build it. Okay, we've done the background now. Let's jump into physically building a journey together. And for this customer journey map, I have decided to focus on the value stream where somebody is going to be purchasing a new life insurance policy. And again, I picked this one because, like I mentioned, it's a pretty emotionally charged experience. And of course, it's where money will be ultimately generated for the company. So starting with a blank piece of paper, you will need to highlight these 4 key elements on the left-hand side of your sheet. Phases are essentially the major stages that they go through. We'll build it out together. The customer activity is what they're doing in those particular phases. Their emotional state is the next item. And I've split that in half, highlighting positive and negative responses. And then ultimately the channel that they use to actually interface with you in each of the phases we talked about up here. So channels, think of them as either physical or digital. So here are the major phases that we have up here assigned to purchasing a new life insurance policy. First, there is awareness that they realize, hey, I may actually have to buy a life insurance policy. Then they start doing research, and then there is a selection process. They start to apply for it. And finally, when they're done with it, there is a bit of celebration or a sense of relief that they're done with one of these major activities in their life. And so the next thing, once you put these major phases up, and they're typically standard when it comes to an onboarding or a purchase stages in the financial services industry, then you can start thinking about, well, what is actually the customer doing in each one of these phases? Starting with awareness, well, the customer may actually become aware for a need for a life insurance policy because they either had a conversation with a friend, or they might unfortunately may have been involved in an accident which kind of kicked off this idea that, hey, I perhaps need more coverage than I realized. Of course, there may be other elements that drive awareness, but for example purposes and keeping it simple, let's just focus on these 2 items. And of course, the emotional state for the individual is not a great one because they're realizing, oh my gosh, I am probably at risk unless I do something about my situation. And so the channel by which they may have become aware of a need for life insurance policies, perhaps in an in-person meeting with their financial rep or with a friend. So with that awareness piece done, let's move on to research. In the research phase, the customer may ask a friend about what to do or who they may be using currently as a life insurance provider. They may go, if they have a financial advisor, talk to their financial advisor, or simply, like the majority of us, are going to be going online to search for options and companies that may be able to provide that service to them. And of course, again, the emotional state here is not too great because it's an issue of too many options and they're uncertain about exactly who to trust, or maybe even what exactly it is, the kind of coverage or the type of product that they exactly need to get the security that they feel they need to acquire for themselves. And so in this stage, again, in this particular phase, the channels that they may be using is using their mobile app, using Google to look for things, or making a phone call to a company to better understand their products and services. Let's build out the rest of the life insurance journey. And I just populated the screen for the sake of being able to continue the conversation. So once they actually started to do the research, they're going to start selecting one or two companies. They need to now narrow down their options from the many to the few. So they may physically contact a rep to get more information, or actually some companies offer you the ability to do a quick application process, which is going online and filling an application. And at this point in time, finally, you can see that their emotional state is actually a positive one, because they've made the realization of what company they're probably going to do business with and what type of coverage and the amount of coverage that they need. And at this point in time, they're probably either using the company's website to collect this information, or they are working with a rep using their telephone. Once the selection process is done, we're going to naturally go into applying, where the client is going to go through whatever application process you have for them. They have to now get their medical exams done and wait for the final decision. Now, look at what's happened to the emotional journey. We've gone from kind of a pretty negative one to slightly coming closer to neutral, to being completely ecstatic that they have finally decided what needs to get done, to back down to not necessarily being super ecstatic, because in their situation, from their perspective, the process took way too long. And it may have been a case where the pricing actually changed. So the price is no longer what they thought it was going to be, or what maybe the financial rep had promised them to be, or the application process had explained it to be. But because of whatever risks that the underwriter has uncovered in the purchase process, they had to modify the price. And that leaves the customer pretty unhappy. Finally, we're back up from an emotional journey perspective, where they decide to accept the proposal that was given to them by the life insurance, and they are in celebration mode because they have received their policy. They feel absolutely fantastic because they are covered and they feel safe, and they may get their policy either through a customer portal that you may provide to them to download their or save their policy in mail, or in person with their financial rep. So here is an example of a journey map. We have highlighted the significant phases they go through. We talked about the major activities. We highlighted the emotional state and the reason they may be feeling these emotions along the journey, and ultimately the potential or possible channels we have provided to them. That's it, guys. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it focused. Now, you could technically take each one of these items and do exactly what we did at a lower level analysis. Once you decide, hey, my gosh, it looks like the application process is leaving a pretty bad impression with the customer, that's when you decide, hey, let's take this particular phase in the purchase process and build another journey map in finer detail to figure out exactly what is it about the customer activity or our lack of interface with them that causes them to become so unhappy. Hopefully you liked this video. I tried to focus the development of a customer journey map to its core fundamental concepts. There are so many mutations of a customer journey map out there. It's very easy to get confused and overwhelmed. But by keeping the concept down to its core and fundamental principles, I'm hoping that you can take the stuff, run with it, and start practicing it in your company immediately. As things get more sophisticated or more complicated, clearly you can add more flavors and additional analysis to a customer journey map. But right out of the gate, what I've given you are the most fundamental and critical concepts in building successful, meaningful customer journey maps. Again, I'm grateful that you came today. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.